I'm Tom Lauk, City of Marshfield's Communications Director. Thank you for joining me on Council Preview. And I have Steve Barg, City Administrator, sitting next to me. We're going to talk about the upcoming council meeting on March 10th, Tuesdays. Going to take place at 6 p.m. At the council chambers. But first, we want to go through some of the highlights that are going to happen. We're going to highlight those, I should say. And let's get right into it, Steve. Consent agenda, that's item I. Board of Public Works met earlier this week, and there's a piece in there about bids for the cemetery.
Yeah, you know, and the term is columbarium, and then you hear that term and you say, well, what about that term, or mausoleum, or all these other things? What are they? The basic principle of a columbarium is it's an above-ground storage of cremated urns, basically, the cremation remains. And those are very popular. As you know, more people are being cremated than being buried in the past. And as a result, we need a place to store those. So a columbarium is a structure that's a final resting place to keep those urns. And those spaces that we have on the one that we built in 2010, about 10 years ago, have gone pretty fast. There aren't many left. As a result, we want to get ahead of the game and get a new one put in place. So this would cost $45,000. It was approved into the 2020 CIP. And so we want to go out and get bids to construct this. Now, it's not like other construction projects. It's not a 10-month kind of thing or something. These go up apparently much quicker than that. But the monies from this are coming out of the perpetual care fund that we use to maintain the cemetery. But as the lot sales come in, we'll use those funds to repay that fund so that we always have money for some of the larger maintenance things that come up on the cemetery grounds.
Okay, so those are just for cremation, correct?
Correct. And there were a couple good questions at the council, at the Board of Public Works meeting, Tom. Sometimes you say, well, was there even discussion at these committee meetings about these items that are coming to consent agenda? There was a question about whether or not we're building enough. You know, if people are buying these so rapidly, is one crematorium that has maybe 64 lots or spaces, whatever, is that enough? And I think the questions were answered well by Justin Casperson, our Park and Recreation Director, that again, if they sell faster than we expect, it really doesn't take real long to construct another one. So we'll just keep monitoring how things are going in the cemetery, and we'll adjust as the needs warrant.
All right, let's talk about a truck for development services. Our staff does go out to sites quite a bit and is looking for a new truck.
Yeah, and the current one that they use, it's actually a station wagon, and it's from 2010, and it's not in great condition. It's rated as average to poor, and it's got some maintenance needs. And it's kind of like when you're, you know, in your own household too. You say, well, when do we stop spending money to repair something that really is on the downhill trend? And it's a hard time to decide sometimes when it is to pull the plug and move on. But the UDC building inspector, a new position that we've had in the last couple of years, really needs a good vehicle for all the inspections. And again, these get used a lot. The inspectors are way more in the field than they are in the office during the busier times. So we went out and got bids, which we always do, and we want the public to know that we're doing this for comparison so we get the best deal for the tax money. But the low bid was a $29,400 from Wheelers in town, so it's good local business as well. And the board was favorable. If the council is favorable, we'll buy that vehicle, and later this year, then the building inspector will begin driving the vehicle in question.
All right, looks like it'll match our other Colorado that we have.
It will indeed.
All right, let's move into lining of sewers. That's really important, you said earlier in our discussion off camera.
It is. You know, as money gets tighter, you know, we're always looking for ways to get more life out of what we have. We've talked about this many times at these discussions, Tom, that we'd like to reconstruct a street, but it's millions of dollars. So what do? Well, we grind up the existing surface and overlay another 2 inches. It's called mill in place. And you know, you have to do that in tough times, just like households do. So if we line sanitary sewer lines, if we do some relining with this special sort of material, we can get a lot more time out of it without having to replace that line. And that's, again, it's much less expensive than doing a full replacement of these pipes. So we went out and got bids, and the low bid is from a company that I've known for a number of years, going back to when I was in Ripon, called Visasewer. And they are, I believe, somewhere in Wisconsin, Pewaukee, Wisconsin, actually. The bid was under budget. It was estimated to be $1.233 million, came in at a little under $1.2 million. So that allows us to get the most possible work done. And looking at lining, you know, maybe it looks like 40,000 linear feet. Now, the average person says, and what does that mean? Well, think about 40,000 feet of pipe being lined. That's a lot of maintenance being done to buy more time out of old sanitary sewer lines. And again, it's so cost effective, Tom. Sam and his crew are on top of this, along with Tom Turchi, our city engineer, and it's good for everyone.
Okay, so I would assume they know the ones that need to have this process done. It's sure not everyone in the city. It'd be a lot more than 40,000 square feet, or what you meant. So that's already kind of figured out and budgeted.
Yeah, and that's a very good question. Really, the two things are the age of the pipe, but then I think you know this. We televise sanitary sewer lines. And when I first heard that, I thought, are we putting them on cable? Is that my street? Just kidding. But from televising them with this special equipment, they can see where cracks are developing, where leaks are developing, and they can get a good handle on what areas of pipe need to be relined. So combination of age and the need is determined by the televising really gives us a good idea of the most critical needs.
Especially when they're doing new road construction or revamping the roads like we have coming up. This process could also take place there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I feel like I pat our staff on the back a lot during these programs, but for good reason. And I don't want to quit. We have excellent staff. Tom Turchi is just an amazing city engineer. He's been doing this kind of thing for a long time, and he worked to get some good bids here. And like I said, the low bid is under budget, so that's a good thing for our cost as well.
All right, let's talk about our assessing department that we have. Currently, we only have one person. It is contracted out by Groda, right?
Yeah.
But we have Keith, and pronounce his last name for me.
Hugh.
Yep. We'll talk about change in pay and adjustment schedule.
I feel like in the last 3 years, the assessing division has been kind of follow the bouncing ball. If you go back to 2016, we had Joan Spencer, who was our full-time city staff assessor, a member of our staff, and we had 2 other full-time employees, and that was our department. Well, then Joan was going to resign, and so we thought, well, okay, what do we do? And we thought we'd look at contract as an option, and we did. And we hired Groda. We contracted with Groda out of Menominee Falls. But ever since then, Tom, there's been this idea of trying to get our arms around how much do we need in terms of other staff and what do they do? Well, when one of our employees, Belinda, left last year, we didn't replace her. We thought, let's see how the dust settles and see what we need to do from there. Well, now where we're kind of at is we need to beef up the position, the other one, Keith. And Keith has been doing a great job of taking training and certifications and going to courses, and he's really growing. And so what we want to do is increase the position from assessment technician to deputy city assessor. And that way, more duties can go his way, and that'll help Groda, because Groda's only here 1 day a week to be overseeing the operation, although they do a lot from remote locations as well. So the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee was favorable to this. They had questions. It's a jump from a pay grade 122 to 126, so that's an increase in the pay range, but they felt it was warranted to get this person to a higher level of capabilities, and so now it's going to come forward to the council for review and approval.
All right, well, we'll look forward to that on Tuesday evening at 6 p.m.
Sounds good.
Well, let's go into another recommended action item, I believe, is it, that we wanted to talk about. Actually, let's move into more of the presentation instead that Josh Miller is going to do. I'm kind of sharing this here with our viewers. Something our department put together, annual report.
Yeah, every year, Josh, and he works with Karen Olson, the business development director over at Mackey, who kind of works both for us and Mackey combined. And they look at the year and they look at all the things that have happened, residential, commercial, industrial, and where the community is, what some of the statistics would show, where we want to go in the future. And they do this report, and you've got it in front of you right now. It's, I think, 18 pages or so. And here's really the main focus of what you're going to hear from Josh, I think, on Tuesday, is things are going pretty well. Now, people might be thinking, wait a minute, we lost Shopco, we lost Office Max, Figgy's closed and all that long ago. How can you be saying that? There's a lot of positive growth and development in the business park, the industrial park downtown, other business locations, and residential. More housing starts, multifamily and single family. And we want to cover that. So the real reason for this presentation, Tom, twofold. One, what's happened in 2019 is better than you think, for a lot of people, I think. And then number two, to lay the groundwork for future decisions. So if the council is being asked in May to assist with the project, they might go back and say, wait a minute, now what did that report say? Do we have enough homes? Do we have enough multifamily? Do we have enough, do we need help in the downtown? And this report can help give them a background as to where the needs are to make this a more vibrant
community.
So it's kind of a twofold purpose.
Okay, yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff. Again, this will be in our packet that will be going out later on Friday of this week. Can look at that if they want to see more. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, and he's got on page 13 the goals too, which a lot of people haven't seen if they're not part of city government. But what's our goal for promoting economic and community development? And it lays out, how we're going to try and get more attractive housing, ensure the sustainability of downtown, these types of things. So at some level, we want to tie what we're accomplishing with what our mission was. And I think Josh does a really great job of doing that.
Okay, well, we'll hear from him and his presentation, hopefully answer maybe people's questions,
Great.
as well as our council may have questions at that time.
Super.
All right, let's move into a piece on Marshfield utilities. As we know, our rates are low right now, which is a good thing for all of us. When we're trying to buy something. Same with our utility. They may want to refinance a piece.
If they do it, it seems like today, Tom, I'm trying to tie what we're doing here, what we're talking about here, to your own home and your own life. But there's a reason for that, because they're the same kind of decisions in the business world. Again, a lot of people that are watching us right now are thinking, yeah, when you get a better rate, you refinance your mortgage on your home to save interest cost. Well, the power plant that utilities built years back is a good facility, but the interest rate, that was back closer to the day when some of the interest rates were higher after the 2008 housing bubble thing and stuff like that. So they want to get the best rate possible, and our financial consultant has suggested that this would be a good time to refinance and save a lot of interest costs. So the council has not seen this before. They'll be getting it, they'll be going through it, but they are being asked to at least give a blessing of support through a resolution that would say it's okay for you to do this. Now, you might be thinking, why would they say no? But I think they'll probably have some questions about the operation itself and trying to get their arms around financially how this all works. And so it should be a good discussion as well. And Nick Cum from the utilities will be covering it.
Okay, so Nick will be here to explain a little bit why that's important.
Yeah.
I'm just curious myself, maybe our viewers as well, the utility does have their own finance director too, or does that come from us?
No, they do. They have, and this has been talked about before, they have duplicate of a lot of things that the city does. They have their own human resources manager, their own finance director, and some of these things. They do work with us. We have meetings where Melissa Barnes and Kent Mueller and others come over and talk to us. And we've talked about in the future, Tom, maybe trying to find ways to work together to get more synergy between us. Maybe Jennifer Rakew, our human resources director, and Melissa could work where they can do something together that would help the human resources of both. But otherwise, they do act fairly independently, and they have their own org structure that would mirror any kind of entity.
Yeah, and that's very common in a lot of cities that have their own utility,
Right.
Especially here in the state of Wisconsin.
Yep.
All
They
right.
have good staff. They have very good staff.
Yeah, definitely. Without the power, we're not sitting here, remember that.
Really good point.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some upcoming schedule changes. I don't want to say changes, but differences in the city council meetings that are going to be coming up because of organizational meetings, CIP. I'll have you go through those so people can mark their calendars if they want to tune in to the channel or stop down.
Yeah, these will all be covered. Yeah. It's a busy time of year because the council has elections every year. Going back to when I was working in Ripon, the council had 4-year terms, and they were staggered. But you'd have that every other year when there were no elections. We don't have that here. So every year we have to have what's called an organizational meeting where the new members are seated and the new council takes the oath of office. For us, that will be Tuesday, April 21st, 2 weeks after the election. At that time, the mayor will make appointments to the committees, subject to council approval. It's a perfunctory housekeeping type meeting, but it's a symbolic meeting that the old council is done and the new council has started. So that'll be Tuesday, April 21st at 6:15 p.m. The next week, we're hoping to hold, with the council's blessing, another joint meeting between the city and Marshfield Utilities Commission. We had a good one last year. It went really well. They tackled issues of kind of joint concern about the dividend we get from Marshfield Utilities, plans for future projects and construction, some things that utilities would want to do in the future. We talked, I think, back last year about the issue of them expanding on the same site where we're planning the aquatic center. So this will be an update to that meeting if it goes through, and we'll cover some of the topics that overlap the two bodies. That would be 5:45 on the 28th, and then you say, well, the council meeting is supposed to start at 6. We would back up the regular council meeting an hour that night. And then I think we're going to talk about CIP a little bit here in a minute, a capital improvement program, and looking to schedule 2 meetings to review this document, one on Thursday, April 30th, one 2 weeks later on Thursday, May 14th, both at 6 o'clock, both open to the public and covered on local cable. But these will be going through all the requests, streets, parks, all the major improvements and the major spending for the next 5 years, and trying to set out a course, a blueprint for the future.
Okay, well, mark those down on your calendar, and we have time yet to kind of dig into what you mean by CIP, Capital Improvement, which you mentioned those meetings begin April 30th, May 14th, 6 o'clock, Common Council Chambers, or Common Council Chambers, Council Chambers, how about that?
Yeah, it's all good, it's all good.
That all makes sense. But, what is this CIP if no one heard about it?
It's really good light reading, if you can see this, only about 150 pages, I think. Again, and I've said this before, but in case people haven't heard this in the past, the budget that we pass every year is a really fixed document. Steve Barg budgets so much for administration and decides, look, I want to spend it on this and not this. And many times we have to come and get the council to amend the budget to transfer money from one fund to another. That's a very specific document. The 5-year plan is specific, but it's more of a framework or a guidebook. Every year it changes, and it covers all the planned major projects that we're going to do, largely streets, but also parks and many other larger expenses in other departments. And typically, Tom, we borrow between $3 to $4 million a year to do these projects. I'd say streets is probably 2/3 of it, you know, if not a little bit more. But what we do is we sit down, staff does it now, and then we'll have those work sessions in the spring, and it really tries to boil it down. And the way it looks right now, it looks like we're going to have to cut out some money. I mean, the department has to put them all out there. We can't fund them all. We have to prioritize, just like people would at home. So we're trying to craft it into something to bring to the council on April 30th. But we try to hit the high priorities. We really don't. The financial situation we're in right now, Tom, we don't do a lot of new projects. It's mainly how can we keep up what we have today? So how can we maintain the streets, parks, and other equipment and buildings that we have today? And that costs a lot of money in and of itself. So you'll see a lot of interesting discussions.
What is the difference of capital improvement program that you have versus doing this later in the budget? You still have to put all these numbers in the final budget. But does this help pre-plan? Is that what it's for?
Well, it does. And of course, this goes up 5 years, so it looks out to 2025, where the budgets just look every year. I want to give Dan kudos. Dan kudos. There you go. We have an employee called Dan Kudos. Dan Kinect, some real kudos. He put this into effect last year, a much better process for doing this. And what came out of that, in part, besides how he kind of restructured things, is when the work sessions end, we actually ask council to adopt that the 2021 items that are in here are going to be in the 2021 budget. We used to not be so formal, so we'd get to the budget in September and October, and we'd say, well, can you do this, repair this building? It's $50,000. No, that's not going to happen. Now we say, if you give it your blessing in the spring, expect to see it, and we're expecting to see it funded in the fall, and that's a high priority item. And the council, went that way last year. We hope they continue to do that, because these are critical maintenance issues for our infrastructure and our other projects.
Okay, yeah, that definitely helps myself, hopefully our viewers here, to understand CIP program. Again, this is all work with department heads and yourself, as well as the finance department, that puts this 200-page, you said?
Yeah, it's 150 or 200, whatever it is.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just going to scan a couple pages here. You look at 2021 at some of the things that are being talked about right now, and you have like sidewalk reconstruction. You have some work in the cemetery roads. You have purchase of taxi vehicles. You have all these things, and I just want people to know how tough this is. That we'll end up with people like Dan and other department heads and me sitting in a room trying to mold this down to what's an amount of borrowing and amount of funding we can afford. And so tough decisions have to be made. So I guess people probably assume that we make tough decisions, but it's never better illustrated than in a process like this.
So if we added everything up in here for 2021, you're saying up to 5 million? somewhere in there?
Well, I didn't get the actual number, but I'm sure it's going to be, a million or something like that more than we can spend, that kind of thing. That would be typical for us, and then we have to boil it down.
Yep. So just people are curious in the general budget, or I call it general budget, the final budget, what's our biggest expense? Is it employment or what is it?
The general fund?
Yeah, come fall time.
The general fund is, largely public safety, police and fire.
Okay.
And again, you probably heard Ron Allman, our finance director, say this before. Cities don't make a product. If you look at an industry, they'll say, well, yeah, your personnel costs should be only 25 or 30%. And then they look at ours and they say, what are you guys doing? Your personnel costs are more than 50%. We're people. We're services. That's what we do. You do your job. The building inspector goes out to the site. We don't have big costs of producing a product. So the biggest cost you'll see in the general fund budget is usually personnel, and it's probably up to 60% of the overall budget. But public safety and public works are the biggest departments. Obviously, taking care of police and fire and taking care of streets and sewer and water and those kind of things are really a critical priority. And parks and other things follow right behind.
Okay. All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much. We'll probably close out here a little bit early, maybe, from our normal almost 30 minutes. Well, but still, there's quite a bit on the agenda to talk about on Tuesday, March 10th, 6 p.m. in the council chambers. Again, mark those other dates down that we mentioned, starting with April 21st, organizational meeting. That will have new council members as well take place at that time. We still first need to get through the election process,
right.
Which is earlier in that month. And then there'll be a joint meeting again with Marshfield Utilities to talk about where they're at. And that is a meeting that's done once a year, but although that starts at 5:45, and the council meeting is at 7. And then we'll follow up with our CIP, which we just spoke about, 6 p.m. on April 30th, and that is a Thursday, not a Tuesday, it's a Thursday, and May 14th, another Thursday at 6 o'clock for a second workshop.
Right, and you mentioned new council members coming on board. We'll be saying goodbye to Chris Jokic and Steve McSwain. We want to thank them for their service. Steve did 1 term, Chris has done, I believe, 3 terms, maybe 4, but I think at least 3. And people don't realize how hard a job it is for them to come to these meetings and make these tough decisions. So we want to thank them, and we'll welcome the 2 new people when they come on board. And that always brings some excitement. It brings new ideas, new thoughts about how we ought to do things, and I'm sure we'll have some good discussions as a result.
Exactly, Steve. And like always, contact your alderperson. It's on the city website. If you have questions, you can also contact us as well at City Hall. But if you have a question, concern, that's really what the alderpersons are there. They can bring that item up, and if there needs to be a discussion. So your voice can be heard many ways.
Oh yeah, and as far as the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, we normally get more interest from people on the budget for whatever reason. I think the budget leads to the tax rate, but this is important. This is what ends up being in the budget. So if you're interested in what streets are being done or what parks are being improved, those kind of things, check us out.
Yeah, definitely. We've always heard, your roads are too rough in any community.
Right.
There's a chance to come and talk, because there will be public comment, I believe, yet at these meetings.
Yeah, and I feel like I say this a lot. You have no idea how seriously your emails, phone calls, and public appearances are taken. I mean, anytime someone comes to a meeting or sends us an email or makes a phone call, those items are usually discussed, and they might not end up in any kind of action, but they're always deeply considered, so your voice is heard.
All right. Well, take that in consideration next time that you have a question or want an answer from your local government or your local city officials. Again, thanks, Steve, for coming by and sharing all that information for our upcoming council meeting.
You bet, Tom. My pleasure.
All right, and I thank you, viewers, for watching us on our council preview. Mark your calendars again for March 10th, 6 p.m. for the Common Council meeting for the City of Marshfield. Thanks for joining us.